My Lords, I rise to speak on Amendments 85G and H, standing in my name on the Marshall list. Now, in this week of all weeks, when temperatures have dropped to -20 in parts of our nation, we're down to less than a week's worth of gas. It's time for the rhetoric on renewables to collide with the reality of what it takes to power our economy and protect the comfort and well-being of our citizens. And there couldn't be a better moment to have this debate, with Mother Nature dialing up a wake-up call to us all. We do need to be more realistic about the practicality of heating and lighting our homes, grounded in the world as it is, rather than how we want it to be. And the purpose of these amendments is to ensure that GB Energy takes a structured and quantitative approach to investing in energy production from renewable and wind energy assets. Now, these investment plans will be evidenced on an annualised basis, but broken down into monthly segments to reflect the seasonality that we all experience, with mandatory monitoring on a monthly basis. At its heart, my amendment seeks to force GB Energy to use a data-driven approach to address the structural energy gap we get every winter, and inter alia to use that data to prioritise investments in energy assets that give energy security above the desirability of decarbonisation. My Lords, energy security and decarbonisation are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but when the UK's energy balance is published on a monthly basis, as these amendments would require, it will act as an obvious spur on investments to keep the lights on every month as a first and primary duty. These amendments don't dilute the ambition of GB Energy. They do not abandon the obvious desirability to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels. But requiring GBE to publish their plans for renewables and to address the predictable gaps that come each year will bring some reality to the rhetoric. My Lords, this country is bumping on empty this week. It's a serious matter. We're too reliant on the kindness of strangers to heat our homes. And as the noble Baroness Brown of Cambridge, head of your Lordship's Science and Technology Committee, says, the crux of the matter is the robustness for our plans for the doldrums of winter when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. I'm not rubbishing renewals, but we just need to be less starry-eyed about their ability to make the contribution some have thought they can, especially in winter. So, the amendments would require GB Energy to be specific about how their amendments in renewable and wind energy assets and the planned additional investments over their existing ones will contribute to the aggregate energy demand in monthly slices. And there's a purpose to this, and the purpose is to ensure that when we flick the switch, the light comes on. We press the button, the motor whirs into action, and when you open the bill, you shouldn't have to fall over in shock. I'm not interested in adding bureaucracy. NESO has a responsibility to produce these aggregate demands, and I don't intend to interfere with those. But we do know there are seasonal variations in sunshine, as with solar, also with wind. We all know the wind tends to blow harder in the winter as storms barrel across the Atlantic. So my amendment will require GBE to take this predictable seasonality into account into its investment plans, to ensure those investments in renewables can realistically contribute to meeting the energy requirement on a monthly basis, especially in winter. And it's about holding GBE accountable for the hard-nosed business of addressing these predictable structural energy gaps in the way that Baroness Brown has highlighted, working hand in glove with NESO to address the market failure. Now, it sounds obvious that this should be the case, but my sense is that the government is primarily focused on decarbonisation, even if it just ramps up surpluses in the summer that require these constraint payments to pay wind turbines to be switched off. If we're chasing carbon alone, we're missing the point. So we need to balance renewables and wind investments in a way that also balances energy markets every month, so we don't run out of juice when it's cold. And this is important because the total amount of standby generation capacity we need is scaled by the months with the greatest deficit. It's not on an annual basis, it's on a monthly basis. And because we have these predictable gaps, we pay standby gas power stations millions to keep ticking over, but ready to jump into action when needed. Control rooms up and down the country are staffed by people playing patience, waiting for that call. And that's expensive. And it also underpins the entire speculative subculture in energy markets in a process the Daily Telegraph called last week the Gasino, where speculators make a fortune whilst householders pick up the tab. My colleagues have noted that The Guardian reported this week that 2 gas-fired power stations were paid 12 million quid for just 3 hours of electricity. We shouldn't be surprised. I mean, running a power station is expensive. There's staff, there's capital, there's maintenance, people sitting around waiting for that call, and it's expensive to provide this insurance. My lords, the truth is we're having to pay twice for much of our electricity, once for the renewable capacity, which we hope will boil that kettle, and then again to have non-renewables on standby, ready to leap into action so that we can ensure that can boil that kettle when the mercury falls. And the consequence is that we're paying some of the most expensive electricity in the world. Our costs rose 124% in 5 years, according to government figures. The UK's energy price per kilowatt hour was 25.85 pence per kilowatt hour in 2023, significantly higher than Germany, France and the US, and we're becoming structurally uncompetitive as a result. So, if enacted, my proposals would mean that the company's objectives and functions would be forced by the market and public opinion to rank energy security above the decarbonisation function. And that way, our £8 billion investment in GBE will keep the lights on. And that's how we get best value from those investments. And we have energy markets that work and more efficiently and at lower cost. And that's a good thing. I expect the Minister to say, well, this is all rather burdensome and it's and buts. But nobody questions. Well, why would we need to publish this stuff? Nobody questions when the OBR publishes on a monthly basis the forecast for the Bank of England. And I don't see why, if it's good enough for the Bank of England, the GBE shouldn't be forced to publish its investments as well. I mentioned in the earlier debate how GB Energy is a private company, but it is established for public benefit. And I do think that publicising their plans and monitoring them is in the public benefit, and they should not be entitled to cloak their activities in a cloak of secrecy, as a private company established under Companies Act 2006 would normally be expected to do. Mandating a monthly look at the market with a view to reducing the amount of backup generation we need will avoid the perverse incentive to invest in renewables that simply make the surplus even greater. My lords, we don't want to over-provide standby backup, so we end up paying excessive compensation payments, and we pay people more than is necessary to play solitaire in those control rooms. But we don't want to under-provide so that speculators hold us over a barrel in the short squeeze. My lords, it follows, in summary, that the requirement to publish the plan to invest with the purpose of reducing the monthly or the predictable energy gaps ensures that it brings a dose of reality to the complicated job, not just of calculating that gap, but doing something about it. And I think that's where GB Energy can have a really good, effective and ambitious role. Success looks like GBE publishing the plans and data so we can see how effective they've been in needing fewer people in the control rooms by minding that gap, seeing fewer people falling over when they open their bill, and a realistic, data-driven, balanced energy market that is held less hostage by ideology, so we can start to move our economy forward to keep the lights on and keeping those motors whirring.
My Lords,